The Galactic Confederation had conquered faster-than-light travel, mastered quantum computing, and solved the rather inconvenient problem of entropy. They had not, however, retained the ability to feed themselves without a machine doing it for them. This was not considered a problem. After all, why would anyone waste time gathering food when a nutrition synthesizer could produce a perfectly balanced meal in 3.7 seconds? The very concept of finding food belonged in museums, filed under quaint barbarisms our ancestors practiced before they got smart, which made the current situation on planet designation ZX-447 somewhat awkward. The diplomatic vessel Harmonious Exchange had been the pride of the Confederation's outreach program. Equipped with 14 different atmospheric processors, translation matrices for 847 languages, and food synthesizers capable of producing cuisine for every known biology, it represented the pinnacle of interstellar cooperation. Past tense being the operative phrase here, because the ship now resembled an extremely expensive paperweight half buried in purple mud. Inside the tilted main cabin, 7 beings from 6 different species were coming to terms with their mortality. The emergency lighting cast everyone in an unflattering amber glow, which seemed appropriate given that they were all about to die. 17 hours, announced Kexthor, the Zentari engineer, his crystalline exoskeleton refracting the light into depressing rainbows. That is how long the backup power will sustain life support. Food synthesis systems are completely unsalvageable. He gestured at the sparking ruins of what had been a machine capable of producing 3,000 different molecular structures. Now it could produce smoke and the occasional small fire. The emergency rations offered Milvex, the Droshan navigator. Her tentacles curled anxiously around her thorax. "We have emergency rations, sufficient for 3 days," replied Kexthor, because apparently he had decided to become the herald of doom. "Generous estimate. Rescue, according to our last transmission before communications array failure, will take 12 to 15 days. Possibly longer, given that we crashed on an uncharted moon that was not supposed to exist." That last part was particularly embarrassing. The moon had simply appeared on their sensors during what should have been a routine diplomatic hop. Appeared, then dragged them down with a gravitational field that made absolutely no sense according to established physics. The Confederation was going to have some strongly worded questions about their stellar cartography department, assuming anyone survived to ask them. Vix, one of the 2 Vilnari representatives, clicked his mandibles together in the specific pattern that indicated resignation to death. His partner Zine mirrored the gesture. Their species had faced extinction twice before. They knew the signs. This was it. The Korvashi delegation consisted of a single being named Olam, who took up roughly a third of the available floor space. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, which gave him the appearance of a mobile boulder with too many arms. He said nothing, but his breathing had taken on the slow, meditative rhythm that his people used when preparing for the long death. "Perhaps," ventured Milvex, her voice taking on the desperate optimism of someone about to suggest something stupid, "perhaps we could extend the rations. Half portions." "Mathematics," replied Kexthor, with the cold comfort of someone who loved numbers more than hope, "does not care about our optimism. Half portions means 6 days. We are still catastrophically short." "Could we enter stasis?" asked Thex. "Stasis pods require functional power systems, which we do not have. Because everything is broken. Because we crashed." Kexthor was really leaning into his role as captain of the Pessimism Brigade. Throughout this entire exchange, the human had been quiet. His name was Renton Vale, 3rd cultural liaison from Earth, and he had spent the last 20 minutes examining the landscape through the cracked viewport instead of contributing to the group despair session. This was notable because humans typically enjoyed talking, constantly, about everything. "Hey," Renton finally said, turning away from the window. "What's the deal with this planet? Moon, whatever, atmosphere breathable?" "Yes," replied Kexthor, confused by the question. "Standard oxygen-nitrogen mix. Remarkably similar to 73% of documented habitable worlds. Why does this matter when we are going to starve?" "Water. Detected multiple water sources during descent. Again, irrelevant to our food crisis. That purple stuff outside. Plants. Vegetation. Yes. Native flora. Likely toxic, completely unprocessed, and absolutely not food by any civilized standard." Kexthor's exoskeleton flickered with irritation. "Are you understanding the severity of our situation?" Renton smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. "Yeah, I'm getting it. We're on a planet with air, water, and plants. Maybe some animals too, right? Saw something moving out there earlier. Indigenous fauna exist. Yes. Preliminary scans suggested small herbivorous creatures before our senses died. This helps us how? Exactly." The human stood up, stretching his arms above his head with a series of small popping sounds that made Milvex flinch. "Right. So here's the thing. I'm gonna head outside and get us some food." Silence. The kind of silence that follows someone announcing they plan to flap their arms and fly to the nearest star. "You are going to get food," Kexthor repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child or someone suffering from cranial trauma. "From outside, where there is no food, where there is no synthesized, pre-packaged, molecularly arranged nutrition product. But yeah, outside, where the actual food is." Olam's rumbling voice emerged from his considerable mass. "The human has suffered neural damage in the crash. This is the only explanation. My brain's fine, big guy. Look, how do you think my species ate before we invented machines to do it for us?" The X and Zine exchanged glances. "You hunted, gathered, like primitives? Like people who enjoyed not starving, yeah." Milvex's tentacles twisted with confusion. "But those are skills from the before time. Surely they have been lost. No species retains such knowledge once civilization advances beyond necessity." Renton laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that suggested he found their entire reality hilarious. "On Earth, we literally have hobbies based on this stuff. Foraging clubs, hunting seasons, survival courses. My grandfather taught me how to trap rabbits when I was 8. My aunt runs wilderness expeditions where people pay money to learn how to identify edible plants." "Your species," said Kexthor with dawning horror, "voluntarily practices survival skills as recreation, entertainment, education, tradition, take your pick. Plus, comes in handy when you crash on an uncharted moon with a bunch of aliens who forgot how to eat anything that doesn't come out of a machine." The human was already moving toward the emergency supplies locker, pulling out items that clearly had nothing to do with food. Cord, a survival knife, a water container, some reflective sheeting. "You will poison yourself," Kexthor stated flatly. "Unknown flora contains unknown toxins. You have no analysis equipment. You will die, and we will have to survive on fewer rations because of your foolishness." "Appreciate the confidence." Renton tested the weight of a piece of metal debris, nodded, and tucked it into his belt. "Look, I'm not going to eat the first purple thing I see. There are rules, ways to test stuff. My species figured this out over hundreds of thousands of years of trial and error. Well, mostly error. But we're pretty good at it now." "This is insanity," muttered Milvex. "This is Tuesday." Renton headed for the emergency airlock. "I'll be back before dark." Try not to start eating each other while I'm gone." He left. The door sealed behind him with a hiss that sounded uncomfortably final. "He will be dead within hours," Kexthor announced to no one in particular. "Should we stop him?" asked Zine. "How? He is an adult representative of a Confederation member species. We cannot restrain him from his own stupidity." Ollum shifted his considerable weight. "We should watch, document his failure. It will be educational for the rescue team." They gathered around the viewport like mourners at a funeral, watching the human figure move through the alien landscape with what appeared to be confidence but was surely just ignorance wearing a convincing disguise. Renton moved through the purple vegetation with careful deliberation, and the aliens watched with a mixture of fascination and morbid curiosity. He stopped frequently, examining plants with a thoroughness that seemed excessive for someone about to poison himself. He broke stems, sniffed them, rubbed them on his forearm, and discarded most of them. "What is he doing?" Milvex whispered, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the ritual of human stupidity. "Testing," replied Ollum, who had activated his emergency medical scanner to monitor the human's vital signs from a distance. "He is exposing himself to small amounts of plant material, checking for allergic reactions, I believe." "That is actually logical," admitted Kexthor reluctantly. The human's methodology became clearer as they watched. He was looking for specific things, plants with certain growth patterns, particular coloration, specific structural features. He dug up root vegetables from the purple soil, examined them, and placed some in his makeshift bag. He found something that resembled berries, performed his testing ritual, and added them to his collection. Then he started building things. "What is he constructing?" asked Thex, mandibles clicking with confusion. Small structures began appearing throughout the clearing near the ship. Loops of cord attached to bent branches. Carefully positioned rocks. Containers positioned beneath holes in the ground. "Snares," said Zine quietly. "He is making snares for catching animals." "Impossible. That requires understanding of animal behavior, environmental awareness, mechanical advantage principles. Your species built ships that cross galaxies." Renton's voice crackled over his still functional comm unit, making them all jump. "You really think setting a rabbit trap is harder than quantum navigation? I can hear you, by the way. These suits have external audio pickup." "You are attempting to trap indigenous fauna," stated Kexthor, deciding to engage directly. "This assumes they will approach your primitive mechanisms. Already watched them for an hour. They've got game trails, feeding patterns, the works. They're herbivores, skittish, about 5 kilos each." "Perfect." There was a grunt of effort. That's trap number 4. "Even if you catch something," Milvex interjected, "how will you process it? You have no preparation facility." "I've got a knife and about 200,000 years of human experience saying I'll figure it out." They watched him work for another 3 hours. The emergency rations got distributed, tiny portions that only emphasized how monumentally screwed they were. But outside, the human kept moving, kept gathering, kept building. He found a water source, a small stream that ran clear over rocks that weren't actually rocks but some kind of mineral deposit. He filled his container, added some kind of purification tablet he'd apparently brought from Earth, and kept working. As the local star began setting, painting the purple landscape in shades of orange and crimson, Renton returned to the ship. He was dirty, scratched and grinning, like he'd won something. "Snares are set. Give them overnight. I've got plants, though. Enough for tonight and tomorrow." He dumped his bag on the cabin floor. Various purple, orange and blue plants tumbled out, along with several root vegetables and what appeared to be some kind of fungus. "You expect us to consume that?" Kexthor's voice dripped with aristocratic horror. I expect me to consume that. You guys can keep rationing if you want. Renton started sorting through his collection. This one's similar to amaranth. Good protein. These roots are starchy, probably like potatoes. The fungus is edible. Tested it already. These leaves are bitter but safe. And these, he held up the berry-like objects, are actually sweet. Surprised the hell out of me. You tested all of this how? Demanded Milvex. Skin test first. Wait 20 minutes. Then lip test. Wait 20 minutes. Then tongue test. Wait 20 minutes. Small amount ingested. Wait an hour. If nothing bad happens, it's probably safe. If something bad happens, you've only got a little bit in your system. That is horrifyingly primitive, said Zine. That is why I'm about to eat dinner, and you're staring at 3 more days of paste. Renton countered cheerfully. He moved to the emergency equipment area and began assembling something. It took them a moment to realize what he was doing. Is that a fire? Olam's voice rose an octave, which was impressive for a being his size. Combustion-based heating. Yeah. Don't worry, I'm using the external vent system. We won't suffocate. We know what fire is, Kexthor snapped. We simply haven't used it for food preparation in 4,000 years. They watched, hypnotized, as the human created flames from the debris around them, feeding it carefully, building it up. He rigged a makeshift grill from metal salvage. Then he started preparing the plants. The roots got washed and placed directly in the coals. The fungus was sliced thin and laid on the hot metal. The leaves were wrapped around other leaves to steam. The amaranth-like seeds were being toasted in a salvaged container. And the smell. Oh, the smell. None of them had ever experienced anything like it. Food from synthesizers arrived complete, perfect, and utterly without the complex chemical reactions that occurred during actual cooking. This was something else entirely. Proteins breaking down, sugars caramelizing, plant fibers releasing aromatic compounds as they heated. What is that? Whispered Milvex, her tentacles reaching unconsciously toward the fire. That's food, replied Renton, turning his vegetables in the coals. Actual food. Real cooking. This is what eating used to mean before you all decided molecules were better. Kexthor's exoskeleton was practically vibrating. The chemical reactions are far more complex than synthesis. The heat is creating hundreds of new compounds. Thousands, probably. That's what makes it taste good. Taste. The X clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. We have forgotten that synthesized nutrition is optimized for efficiency, not sensation. The human pulled his roots from the coals, revealing steaming interiors that looked disturbingly appetizing. He cut them open, added some kind of paste he'd made from the berries and leaves, and took a bite. The sound he made was obscene. That's good. That's really good. Little smoky, slightly sweet, earthy undertones. Yeah, we're not going to starve. We, Olam repeated. Renton looked up, surprised. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to cook for just myself while you guys waste away on ration paste. That'd be pretty messed up. He gestured at his makeshift feast. There's plenty. I don't know how your biologies handle raw plant matter, but we can test it. Carefully. Scientifically. Well, as scientifically as we can with zero equipment. Another pause. Longer this time. You would share, said Milvex slowly. Even though we doubted you. I mean, you weren't wrong to doubt. This is crazy from your perspective. But yeah, obviously. We're all stuck here together. He plated some of the roasted fungus on a piece of salvaged material. Milvex, your species is omnivorous, right? According to the briefing documents. Historically, yes. In practice, we have not consumed unprocessed organic matter in generations. Want to try some mushroom? I'm like 90% sure it won't kill you. Her tentacles trembled. 90%. That's pretty good odds in my business. She reached out slowly, as if approaching something dangerous, and took the offered piece. She examined it with all the caution of a bomb disposal expert. Then, with visible trepidation, she ingested it. Her entire body shuddered. "Oh," she said quietly. "Oh my. Good. I do not have words. It is texturally complex. The temperature variation, the way it breaks down during consumption. This is what food was. This is what food is. You just forgot." One by one, carefully, and with Renton's methodical testing protocols, they all tried the cooked plants. The Vilnari found the roasted roots agreeable to their digestive systems. Olim, whose species could process nearly anything organic, declared the seeds acceptable. Even Kexthor, after considerable hesitation, consumed some of the steamed leaves. "This is inefficient," he complained. But he took another portion. When they bedded down that night, it was with something none of them had expected: full stomachs, and a strange new appreciation for what they'd lost somewhere between the cave and the cosmos. Morning arrived with a sound that was either very good or very bad, depending on your perspective. It was the sound of something small screaming, because it had been caught in a snare. Renton was outside before most of them were fully awake, and when he returned, he was carrying 3 furry creatures that looked vaguely like a rabbit had gotten into a fight with a squirrel and lost. They were very dead. "Breakfast," he announced. "You are going to prepare animal flesh." Zine's voice carried pure horror. "I mean, yeah, that's the whole point of the snares. You guys have any dietary restrictions against meat? Besides the moral ones, which we can discuss later when we're not in survival mode. Most of them could, technically, process animal protein. Most of them looked like they might prefer death." "I will spare you the details," Renton said diplomatically. "Just know that by tonight we'll have stew." He worked outside, which was probably for the best. But by evening, when he returned with a pot full of something that smelled impossibly rich and complex, even Kexthor had stopped protesting. The stew contained meat, roots, greens and fungus, all cooked together until everything was tender and the flavors had merged into something greater than the sum of its parts. Renton had even found something similar to wild onions, which added a sharp, savory note. "The Maillard reaction," Kexthor muttered, analyzing the broth with his emergency medical scanner. "Protein chains breaking down, amino acids reacting with reducing sugars, creating hundreds of new flavor compounds. This is actual chemistry. This is actual food," corrected Renton. "Chemistry you can eat." They all ate, even those who swore they couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, because the alternative was ration paste, and their bodies were betraying them with hunger that no synthesized nutrition had ever truly satisfied. "My species," said Olim quietly, "has a legend, a story of the before time, when we would gather around heat sources and share the day's findings. We thought it was mythology." "It was history," replied Renton. "Just history you forgot." The days passed. Renton's foraging radius expanded. His snares caught more game. He found additional edible plants, including something that fermented into a mildly alcoholic beverage that Milvex declared disturbingly pleasant. He showed them how to prepare food, how to identify safe options, how to work with fire. They learned, slowly, awkwardly, with the clumsiness of civilized beings discovering their own prehistory. They learned. Kexthor became surprisingly adept at fire management, treating it like a delicate engineering problem. Thex and Zine developed a talent for identifying edible fungi. Milvex, with her excellent fine motor control, learned to set snares. Olam discovered that his species' traditional meditation practices were remarkably similar to the patience required for tracking game. By day 10, when they heard the distant sound of rescue vessels entering atmosphere, they were healthier than when they'd crashed. Better fed, certainly. More connected to something fundamental that they'd forgotten existed. The rescue team found them sitting around a campfire, eating roasted vegetables and what appeared to be some kind of local game bird that Renton had managed to trap. The rescuers' confusion was palpable. "You were reported as crashed with no food synthesis capability," said the rescue commander, a Zentari like Kexthor. "We expected to find you near death." "We expected that too," replied Kexthor, holding what appeared to be a drumstick. Then the human remembered that food existed before machines. Before machines, it grows. Out there, he waved vaguely at the landscape. You can just eat it. After preparation, with fire. The rescue commander looked at Renton. "You taught them to forage, and hunt, and cook. Pretty much covered the basics. That knowledge still exists in human culture. My dude, we have cable channels dedicated to it." The rescue commander's exoskeleton flickered through several colors that indicated confusion, amazement, and mild existential crisis. "I see. Well, medical evaluation will be necessary, but you all appear to be in remarkable condition for crash survivors." As they packed to leave, Milvex approached Renton privately. "When we return to the Confederation," she said quietly, "I am submitting a proposal for cultural preservation of food preparation practices, with your species as consultants." "Yeah? We have forgotten something important. Something fundamental. You showed us what we lost when we decided efficiency was more important than experience. Happy to help. Though fair warning, once you start actually tasting food, synthesizers are going to seem pretty boring." "I believe," she said, a smile in her voice. "That is precisely the point." The rescue ship lifted off, carrying 7 survivors who had expected to starve, but had instead learned to eat. Below them, the purple landscape rolled on, indifferent to the small drama that had played out on its surface. The campfire still smoldered, sending up a thin trail of smoke. The Confederation had mastered the stars, conquered distance, and unified hundreds of species under one banner. They had forgotten, somewhere along the way, how to feed themselves without a machine. It had taken a crash, a desperate human, and a moon that wasn't supposed to exist to remind them that civilization built on top of survival wasn't superior to it, just different. And maybe, occasionally, a little too far removed from what made living worth doing in the first place. But at least now they knew where to find the good mushrooms. 3 weeks later, back at Confederation headquarters, Renton found himself standing before an assembly of cultural anthropologists, xenobiologists, and more than a few bureaucrats who looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire concept of unprocessed food. Milvex had been serious about her proposal, and apparently it had gained traction faster than anyone expected. "Let me understand this correctly," said an elderly Korvashi administrator, her many arms folded in what might have been skepticism or indigestion. "You are proposing that we establish educational programs teaching primitive food acquisition and preparation techniques across Confederation space." "Not primitive," Renton corrected gently. "Foundational. There's a difference. And yeah, that's exactly what we're proposing. Because what happens the next time someone crashes somewhere remote? Or when a colony's supply chain breaks down? Or when any of 1,000 things go wrong with your food synthesizers? We have redundancy protocols, another administrator interjected, which failed spectacularly on the moon that wasn't supposed to exist. Kexthor pointed out from his position beside Renton. The engineer had become an unexpected ally in this campaign. Our redundancy protocols assumed multiple simultaneous system failures were statistically impossible. We were wrong. Moreover, Milvex added, her tentacles gesturing emphatically, we have lost touch with something culturally significant. The act of preparing and sharing food was foundational to social bonding across most species' evolutionary histories. We have optimized it away, and in doing so, we have lost something we did not realize we valued. The assembly murmured, which in a room full of different species created a sound like a malfunctioning orchestra. The human survival skills saved our lives, the X said simply. That is documented fact. We would have died waiting for rescue. Instead, we thrived. This seems worth preserving. The elderly administrator was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, and humans still teach these skills, voluntarily, for enjoyment, for tradition, connection, self-reliance, and enjoyment. Renton confirmed. We never forgot where we came from. Maybe that's weird by galactic standards, but it kept us alive when it mattered. Another pause. Then, surprisingly, the administrator's expression shifted into what might have been a smile. Very well, proposal approved for pilot program. We will begin with volunteer participants. Humans will serve as primary instructors. And someone please ensure the fire suppression systems are updated. Apparently, we will be needing them. As they left the chamber, Kexthor's exoskeleton flickered with what Renton had learned to recognize as amusement. You have just convinced the Galactic Confederation to learn how to cook. This will be in history texts. Good, Renton replied. Maybe next time someone crashes on an impossible moon, they'll remember that food doesn't require a machine. Just knowledge, patience, and a willingness to get your hands dirty. Metaphorically dirty, I hope, muttered Kexthor. Buddy, wait until you learn about fishing.